And welcome into Season 1, Episode 8 of Around the Paw. Glad to be back with you this week. And we have a great show just like we promised you last week. To get started, I'm Garrett Mitchell, your host as always, joined by Griffin Barfield and Clifton Kennedy. And tonight, the astute gentleman that you see on your screen is none other than former Clemson offensive lineman Eric McLean. He played for the Tigers, of course, from 2011 to 2015 and is currently an analyst for the ACC network. And we are just thrilled to have Eric and his wealth of knowledge on the episode tonight. So let's just jump right into it. And we're going to start off. We're going to talk some practice notes and what Coach S1E and the players have been saying as they've come out of fall camp, and fall practice is well underway right now. And Eric, you're our guest of honor, and we'll just jump right into it, and we'll toss you the first one. Frankly, there is a lot of excitement that's coming out from the Clemson camp right now, and I don't know that this is probably the most excitement that I've heard from everybody surrounding the team in the program in several years. So what do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think it's for good reason, right? You know, when you make a coordinator change, when you have a quarterback change, and, ironically enough, the bad seasons that Clemson has had, quote unquote, a nice little bit of change is good for everybody. So it really feels to me kind of like my freshman year, 2011, where Chad Morris came into town, and, the offense was just going to be high speed, a lot of points, yards, all those different things. I think that's what people are kind of expecting here with Coach Riley, and everything that he's done in his career, and of course what he did at TCU last year and the amazing year that they had. I don't see why anybody would think it would be any different.
No, you're absolutely right. And Griffin, Clifton, Eric, one of the things that we've really been hearing a lot of, and Coach S1E has touched on this at length in interviews that he's done in fall camp, and now that practice has gotten underway, several position groups that have really been churning out excitement. And one of those on the offensive side of the ball, and you just mentioned the offense, and that's the running back position. And I think everybody's been very confident about this running back duo, of course, with Will Shipley and Phil Maffa. Yep. And I can't wait, Griffin, to start with, to see what they're going to do under Garrett Riley, how he opens things up offensively. I think that could really be an exciting element to this offense.
Absolutely. And I think that this running back room could truly go under the radar, especially with, an air raid offense with, maybe a centralization more around the wide receivers. But, if it ain't broke, don't fix it when it comes to the running backs. You're returning two incredible running backs with Will Shipley, second team All-American on the athletic side. Phil Maffa is just as good. And you have unlimited depth right behind them, getting guys like Dominique Thomas, the freshman Jarvis Green. In my honest opinion, I think that, this running back room is destined for success this year. I think that, like I said, they might go a little bit more under the radar than people might think. And, expect a lot from them. I think that you're going to see a lot of great production from them this year.
Yeah, and Clifton, what do you think about that, touching on what Griffin said? And then I'd like to get Eric's thoughts on that as well. But, again, just a lot to be excited about. And, Griffin, I think you said it perfectly, the way that Coach Riley can incorporate the running game and these running backs around what he wants to do through the air. It adds a dimension and an excitement to this offense that I don't think's been there over the last several years.
Yeah, so when Dabo was in one of his press conferences, he was talking about, for this to be a good year, he thinks both running backs need to be on point. And he kind of, I think that's why he brought Thunder back into the coaching room, is because he wanted this room to kind of be, Thunder and Lightning, and he thinks both of them are going to be good. So, and for this to be a good year, both of them have to be on point, I think.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to see, how many two-back systems do we have? How many formations, how many plays? We did see that a little bit last year. Saw a little bit of that at TCU. And I think it's something where it just adds a wrinkle, right? Because you don't know who's going to be getting the football. You don't know who's going to be a passing threat, a receiving threat. And it just gives you a really unique look that, now teams have to account for. And you add with Kade Klubnik's legs. I mean, my goodness, you essentially could run the triple option back there with those guys, right? Not what we're used to seeing. But, having truly three running threats in any given play, I think the last piece is just how much will Shipley be used as a receiver? Will he be flexed out in space? Will it be just strictly routes out of the backfield? He's such a weapon that I don't think we've quite seen his true form in that, his final form, and how much better and more explosive can he be this season?
Right. And do you feel like that Shipley's versatile nature on offense, he can catch the ball, he can flare out of the backfield, he can run between the tackles, he can run outside. Do you feel like that the versatile nature of his game lends itself more to a wide open offense like Garrett Riley runs, especially when they want to go tempo and move the ball and snap the ball quickly?
Well, I think just having a guy that's that versatile, yeah. When you're able to do a lot of different things, you don't have to substitute out. You don't have to have a timing thing of, oh my goodness, we can't run this play because X player is in. He can do it all. I think, again, talking about that final form, really the last piece of his game is going to be pass blocking, being in there, sticking his head in the fire, really being, and maybe that's just a size thing. At the end of the day, it's hard when you're 210 to block a 300-pounder. But, just showing that, the smarts, the technique, how can he continue to take a step there as well? So truly where he's a 3-down back and can be in any situation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on all accounts, I think, and it just brings that excitement for sure. And when you look at the ACC as a whole, and Griffin, Clifton, I want your take on this as well. But Eric, you see the ACC as a whole with the ACC network, and when you think of guys like Shipley and Maffa for Clemson, you've got Trey Benson for Florida State and some other backs around the ACC. I do think that Clemson and the ACC as a whole maybe get sold a little bit short when it comes to the talent and the depth at the running back position. There's going to be some really good matchups that we see day in and day out on Saturdays. No,
there's no question about it. I mean, it's a very deep group, and interesting to see how can it take another step forward this year. With the ACC in whole, you look around the talent, you look at the star players, running backs, quarterbacks. The depth is really there. And how can the league take a step forward where you got to win those out of conference matchups? You got to perform in those big time, matchups there, especially when it's SEC, ACC, and everybody's watching. And so I think if you can take advantage of that, if you can really in those prime games show that, hey, I am a player, I am one of these, superstars, then you can slowly start changing a narrative. But as we all know, it takes winning.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just Clifton, if you want to touch on that just a little bit too, and Griffin as well. What are your thoughts about the running backs around the ACC? And from our vantage point, maybe a little bit more from the outside looking in. How do you see some of those battles playing
out? I think Eric said it perfectly. That during those ACC SEC battles, I think you could take the Orange Bowl perfectly. For example, you have to win those games if you want Clemson to receive the benefit of the doubt that we've talked about before. I think that's incredibly important. But in regards to the running backs, I think, the skill players, like you talked about, Trey Benson from Florida State, Will Shipley, Phil Maffa with being the 1-2 punch. I think that it can, have incredible production. I think, you can see these guys having great seasons, potentially All-American caliber. Obviously, we do have many different, skill players from around the league, different All-Americans, but I think you're just going to see the production there. And the running game is a very, very underrated spot for many of these offenses, especially, for Florida State, for example. You're seeing all this hype around Jordan Travis and, his receiving core. But I think, the running game goes under the radar, and I think you see a lot of these running backs go under the radar as well and have some incredible seasons.
Yeah, I think there are some great running backs around the ACC, like you said, at Florida State, and here at Clemson. So I'm excited to see what happens,
Right. And Eric, I think it's been touched on and talked about by so many people, and for very good reason. It's really going to how Clemson season boils down is going to be highly predicated on how Kade Klubnik plays, his level of maturation, how he takes that next step. So from what you've seen and from everything that you've been hearing, how do you feel like Kade is handling that process as he transitions from a guy who came on late at the end of last season, came in after one series of the ACC championship game, played the entire Orange Bowl, to now he is the guy, he's QB1, and he has that expectation that's on his shoulders. How do you feel like he's handling that, and is he going to be ready for the moment?
Yeah, I think, when you look at the young man and just ask him about that situation, for him to finally have an off season and a fall camp now as the guy, as QB1, it's a lot different. And, you kind of have to earn that respect from your teammates, especially at the quarterback position, being a young guy. It's not something that's just given to you or not handed to you. And I think he went out and took that, in winter conditioning, in spring ball, in summer drills, all these different things. It's something that, when you get that trust, it's just a different level that you can get to really quickly. So that, on top of how he's got into the playbook, the relationship that he has with Garrett Riley, physically growing, like he looks bigger to me, looks like he's in a better place from a physical maturation standpoint. And then just his abilities. I mean, it is funny to me from the national perspective, people, have this inclination. Sorry, guys. Have this inclination of that he wasn't, one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country, right? Like when he was being recruited, this guy was one of those dudes. And, I think he's easily going to get back to that. His abilities to be able to move in the pocket, his abilities to extend plays, and then just his creativity getting the ball downfield. I think Clemson fans are going to be very excited and very happy to see that.
Right, and we've touched on this in several episodes that we've done already, and a big part of the production that Kade brings to the table and how quickly he assimilates into that role from the first game as the QB, as the undisputed QB1, is also going to be how do the wide receivers step up and support him. And that's one thing that we've talked a lot about here is that there's a lot to be excited about, at least that we think with this receiving core. It looks like that the attrition has finally gotten under control a little bit. It's a healthier group. You've got guys like Adam Randall who have just, from all indications, have been phenomenal from the spring onward. Antonio Williams, I think, is more of a proven commodity. And then a guy that I'm really excited about is Cole Turner, who is going to get a shot on the big-time stage this year for the first time. We saw him flash against North Carolina. So, what can you say about that group, and how well do they complement Kade Klubnik in this Clemson and Garrett Riley offense?
Yeah, well, funny enough, I think Bo Collins is going to be the guy. I think that he needs to be the guy. And, again, a lot of people forget that, at the start of the season, the first 3, 4, 5 games, like he was leading the ACC in touchdowns. I mean, he was really – a go-to guy, was coming together, putting it together, and then he got hurt. And so kind of talking with him when we were at camp and, just hearing how he's doing and saying that, he's in the best shape of his life, feels great, feels the best he's ever felt. I think that's the real secret to Clemson's success this year is, can he stay healthy? Can he stay on the field? And then, pieces with Antonio Williams, freshman All-American, twitchy as all get out, a guy that was a freshman All-American last year, Adam Randall. How far can those guys take a step? No sophomore slumps. Like, can they take a jump forward and really be those big-time playmakers? The interesting thing to me, man, is just who is going to be that Nuke Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams? Are those guys on the roster? Are these guys capable of evolving into that? T. Higgins, Justin Ross, et cetera. Maybe. I feel good about it. I think that they can. But it's kind of one of those things where you got to see it in a game. I have to see it proven. Practice is great. Practice is one thing, but when we're keeping score and we're in that valley, it's a lot more pressure, and you've got to be able to stay healthy and stay on the field. But I think the guys are there. I think the unit between Randall, Collins, Williams, Turner, and then Jake Brenningstool at tight end, if those 5 stay healthy, Clemson's going to win a lot of games, score a lot of points.
So which one of these freshman receivers are you high on? Because I know there's a lot of freshmen and a lot of people that are high on all these freshmen. So, and we've heard good things coming out of camp. So even from the veteran receivers about the freshmen. So which one do you think is going to stand out?
I've got to tell you, Clifton, I'm keeping it a secret. I'll tell you after week. Because I think that's I think it's information that you wouldn't have unless you were at camp, and I don't want to give any trade secrets away. Actually, in Durham, North Carolina right now, I don't want those Blue Devils listening to this and getting ready for that game. So I'm going to keep it a secret. Yeah. But no, there's 2 guys that I think are going to be really good. And when I was there, they were getting first-team reps. So it'll be interesting and to see how much do they play, how much do they make of their opportunity. How's that for a little teaser?
Yeah.
We love it. And I'll tell you what, Griffin, I feel like I may be dipping the hook back into the same pond with this one. But before we started the episode today, we were talking amongst ourselves about X factors and wondering. You were wondering who that X factor might be. So, Griffin, if you want to pitch it to Eric, but
let's hear it.
Who do you think could be an X factor?
Yeah, and then once again, I'll hook this one to you, but I think that there's so many players, especially, the old meets new, if you get what I mean. And there are a lot of players that are coming off injury as well. There's a new look offense with Garrett Riley. So my question to you is, with a lot of excitement around this team, is there somebody that, could get this team more points, who could get this team stops on the defensive side? Is there anyone that truly excites you?
I think Wade Woodaz is going to take a really big step forward. I already think that Barrett Carter and Jeremiah Trotter are the two best tandem linebackers in the country. I think if he can step up his game, it's not even close. It's the best unit in the country. How do they use him will be interesting. You look at that North Carolina game, he was in that Isaiah Simmons role, playing, kind of a deep safety, moving all over the field. He's gotten bigger. My gosh, he looks so good, man. Probably 235, came in as this little string bean and now looks like an absolute war daddy. How does that translate to the field? Because there's a lack of depth there too, right? Like, if Clemson, depending again on look, they have two linebackers out there and an extra safety. Is Wade that kind of guy that moves around and plays a couple of different positions for him? So I think he can have a really big impact and maybe a little bit bigger than people think. And then I'll just probably stay on defense and talk about TJ Parker. He's a guy that, again, a very shallow position at defensive end, with Justin Maskell and Xavier Thomas, who are great and I think can have really, really good years, but health is a concern. And especially at that position that's so violent, who steps up next, who can really develop and things that I've seen written and heard Coach Sweeney talk about. Very excited about TJ Parker and his work ethic and really understanding of the defense at such a young age.
Right. And as we talk about different position groups and impact guys who could step up, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the position group that you yourself played on.
You're waiting on it, baby. Come on.
Yeah. You helped anchor down some of those great early Clemson offensive lines as this run of dominance and national prominence began. You had your experience in the college football playoff as well. So when you look at this Clemson offensive line, especially compared to maybe some of the ones that you played on, what kind of comparison can you make with this group? And how well do you think that they're set up to play? And can this be a group that finally puts it together and maybe vanquishes some of those concerns that group has had over the last several years?
Well, I think it is a little bit twofold because man, when you look at the run blocking of the offensive line last year, it was elite. I mean, they were moving guys out of the way. The unfortunate circumstance was just, the lack of mobility at the quarterback position. I mean, that hit a lot of my problems having Deshaun Watson behind me. He made me look a lot better than I really was. So when you can have a guy like that, which I think Clemson does now in Kade Klubnik, that solves a lot of your issues, right? And of course, that quarterback also has to have the awareness not to just dance around like crazy. He's got to go. You can't just run backwards. You got to make something happen and not make a bad situation worse. So I think by just, addition by subtraction, that offensive line is going to be notably better, but they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. I think that when you look at Tristan Lain at the left tackle position, they feel really good about him. And man, he's completely changed his body. I remember when he came in, I didn't even know if he'd ever see the field. Just dealing with the COVID year that he didn't get to play his senior year, maybe even dealt with some injury and didn't have, the right stuff because of COVID and the treatment and things of that nature. He looks great. Marcus Tate, big, massive guy that can probably play a plethora of positions. And then you got a guy who's playing the center position and putting him for the second year. Like he never had snapped the ball before. And we're putting him in a game where we're keeping score and telling him to snap the ball. So I think just the continuity of all of that with Blake Miller going into his second year, with Walker Parks in his second year at guard, there was a lot of firsts last year that people just didn't understand. And hey, go play offensive line. It's all the same, right? No, it's not. It's very different. And, for a lot of these guys to be in their second year together with, Coach Thomas, I think is vital. And I think we're going to see a really big step forward.
Absolutely. And from one side of the ball, the offensive line, as a very veteran and experienced group, let's kick it back over to Griffin. And I just want to go right down the line and talk about a position group on the other side of the ball that's also has a lot of veteran presence and leadership. And on top of that is very talented as well. And that's the defensive secondary with guys like Sheridan Jones, Nate Wiggins, Andrew Makuba, mixed in with some of the younger players, which to me looks like it's going to form a very formidable back end of this Clemson defense. So, Griffin, starting with you, your take, we've talked about it a little bit before, but your thoughts on the Clemson secondary, and would like to hear what all three of you think about that.
Right. And I think being healthy is the most important thing. You saw this Tiger secondary being very limited in maybe very key games during the middle of last year. But even in interviews, I had the chance to be in the press room when Nate Wiggins was there, and he's like, this offense, this air raid offense has just helped us 100%. So yeah. I just generally think that, and another guy, I believe it was Andrew Makuba, said that the offense keeps them on their toes at any point in time. So, it just helps them against other offenses and just helps them for, game time situations. And not only that the young core has been very, very important. And these guys have said this. Avion Terrell, I believe his name is, the younger brother of AJ Terrell, has just been, balling out for one name to say the least. So I think if, this Tiger secondary stays healthy and they stay on the field, I think you're looking at a secondary that will have a lot better of a year than they did last year.
Yeah, I think last year, they got ripped during that Wake Forest game, and then they got better as the year went on, and then you get some of these young guys in here, and the veteran guys are talking about how they're picking up the playbook, they're pitching in, they're really digging in at practice, wanting to learn everything, asking questions. So I really think some of them young guys are pushing those older guys, and it's just given that. Defensive backfield, it's just making them better. So,
yeah, and again, it's one of those things similar to receiver. I just got to see it, right? You have to see them noticeably get better. The talent is there; it's undeniable. It was last year. When you look at 4- and 5-star players that they have, kind of in the wings and on the field, I think when you look at Nate Wiggins, I mean that's an NFL cornerback. That's what you want. The body type, the speed, the aggressiveness. Can he put it all together? Can he put it in his mind that I am a ball player and become a shutdown corner that people don't even look at, right? I think, it's interesting when the NFL draft comes along and, they throw up cornerback stats and a guy doesn't have any picks or no PBUs. Well, guess what? It's because they were terrified to throw it to him. That's a good thing, and to see that kind of be created. It was weird for me, the inconsistencies in the backfield. Defensively, there were games where the corners really struggled. Then there was games where the safeties really struggled. It never really was at the same time. But how can that unit that is so veteran-led and just full of star power come together to be one of the, kind of forces in the ACC? Because the talent, like I said, is undeniable there. Who steps up and can really do it? Everything I've heard about Sheridan Jones is that he's found a new swag, a new belief in himself. And, kind of in his final year here, can he leave a big mark and a lasting impression on the Clemson Tigers? So everything that I think and know and see is that it should be improved. But at the end of the day, you've got a really big test week 1 in a very important and impressive quarterback and Riley Leonard that's going to test that very early, and a strong receiving core at that. So we'll know pretty quick, about this Clemson defensive backfield.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, that was my next question to you, is kind of like, and I guess we can kind of wrap up with this because I know you have to get out of here, but kind of like, what do you think about Clemson going into week 1 at Duke?
Yeah, I think the good thing is Coach Dabo Swinney has mentioned Duke many, many times. So it's – and he always would, but just the way that he does it, he understands this isn't the Duke of old, right? This isn't the Duke team that I played that had a track still built around it that we hung – 50 points on, and Taj broke, I think, numerous ACC records. Like, this is a really good football team that has like 78% of their production back offensively, 99% of their rushing production back. And I think maybe only lost 2 or 3 guys defensively. They're good and they're loaded. You're going to their house on a Monday night, Labor Day night, where the entire country is going to be watching. And, you've got a new system and you have your expectations. So there's a little bit of, interesting amount of pressure, for the Clemson Tigers and a mobile quarterback. We've seen that historically, that can give some fits. But with all that said, I think Clemson is going to make a statement. I think Clemson is going to flex their muscles and, really put on a show in a night where there might be 4 or 5 million people watching, and remind people that the Tigers are back.
And Eric, before we let you head on to your next engagement, this last question was one that we all got together and said, you know what, this one's going to be the brain teaser of the episode right here. But you played on a lot of great Clemson teams between 2011 and 2015, and you were part of those teams that really laid the framework for what Clemson became as a national championship contender and then national championship winner. You were part of those games, beating Georgia at Death Valley, beating Ohio State in the Orange Bowl, beating LSU. Everybody remembers 4th and 16 if you're a Clemson fan. But when you look back on those great teams that you played on, the great games that you were a part of, if you had to compare this Clemson team from what you see right now to any of the teams that you played on in your career, in your mind, what would be the closest comparison?
Man, probably 15, right? I mean, you're looking at a quarterback of what he's able to do. Kade Klubnik and Deshaun, very similar, even in body. Like, if it was black and white and you couldn't tell who was who, I think you'd be surprised on how similar those guys look and how similar they play. They probably have a little bit more depth at running back than we did, probably have better defensive tackles. We had some really good defensive ends. Better linebackers. So it's very comparable. And I think, to get and be quite frank, I think this team can certainly be back in the playoff. Now, am I going to name them a defensive or a national champion? Not quite yet, but maybe after week 1 when I see them, maybe. But I think they have that in their possibilities. And, with Coach leading the way here, man, you never quite know. So I think this is a very good team. And, I think there's a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, never count the Tigers out, and that's one thing we always say. And every day is a great day to be a Clemson Tiger as well. So hopefully we're celebrating here in about 10 days after a win against Duke, and we'll see how the season plays out from there. But I agree with everything you said, and I think Griffin and Clifton probably do too. Football's here, and it's a great time to be a Tiger, and there's a lot to be excited about.
No doubt about it, man. I appreciate y'all having me, and excited to see what this season holds, man.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. We appreciate it. Come back anytime.
No doubt.
Appreciate it, Eric. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Well, guys, how much of a treat was that? Having Eric McLean on the show, just his personality, wealth of knowledge, his insight into the game and the Clemson program. If somebody like Eric McLean is confident that it's going to be a great season for the Tigers, then by gosh, I think we all should be pretty confident that, there could be something special that's being built up there in these hills here in 2023.
I agree. And, it was an absolute treat having Eric on the show. I loved hearing, a media personality, speak about the Tigers and speak about his thoughts on it as a whole. It's nice to see, a new opinion. But, yeah, just once again, I'm liking what I'm hearing from him. I'm liking what I'm hearing just overall around. It seems like 2023 could be a great year to be a Clemson fan. Yeah, for sure.
It was great hearing from him. I'm super appreciative towards him. He didn't have to do this. It was just super awesome to have him on the show. I was a little disappointed that he dodged my question about – freshman, man. I was a little
well, hey, look, you've got to keep some cats in the bag. No pun intended.
Hey,
we'll find out in 10 days.
We'll find out. Yeah, I'm not worried about
we'll find
it.
Out.
But yeah,
we like surprises though. It's like Christmas morning. We like surprises.
That's right.
Exactly.
But I think I know who he's talking about.
Yeah, I do too.
think I
Now,
know
see, I
this
was
one.
thinking to myself the entire time, I've kind of got an idea, but you know what? If we're right, we'll find out here in about a week and a half, and hope we are. But hey, football time, it's here. It's coming up before we can even blink. It'll be time for kickoff at 8 p.m. Wallace Wade Stadium, Duke University, Durham, North Carolina on Labor Day Monday. So let the countdown begin, guys.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm super
Can't wait.
excited. Super
Well,
excited.
Well, speaking of that first game, coming up on next week's show, Season 1, Episode 9 of Around the Paw, we have another guest who will be joining us next week. And again, we won't spoil too much of the surprise, but we have a Duke insider who's going to be joining us on next week's episode to help give some insight from the Duke perspective and the Duke camp, and can kind of break down things from the Blue Devils side of things, and maybe put a fresh look on where both teams stand coming into this matchup on Labor Day Monday. So we're really looking forward to that as well. And we like to keep it fresh here on Around the Paw. Clemson's always fresh on the field. We're fresh here on Around the Paw. That's just how we do things. So until next week, we appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, just a major, major thank you to Eric McLean for lending his time and thoughts. And we'll be right back at you next Wednesday night. But until then, I'm Garrett Mitchell. Griffin Barfield, who is back in God's country in his dorm room at Clemson now. And
yes, sir.
Until next time, as always, go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.